Summer Flynn.
Good one. All right. Okay, but as good as that was, I think we need to ramp it up like times a million because we have Heather Langenkamp. Hello. So how has the convention treated you so far?
Very well.
Good.
It's only, what time is it, 2 o'clock?
1:50.
Oh yeah, I've been very busy. Thank you so much, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, obviously we have a lot of Nightmare fans, and I'm no different, but there are a few things that I want to talk to you that are not Nightmare related about, okay? Okay, I've talked to you about this before, and I even gave you a picture once. Tanya and Nancy.
Yes. Yes. So, you want to know about it?
Yeah, your experience
How
making
I got
it, or your experience making it, and you stood on ice skates. Did you do any skating?
Interesting questions. So, I was doing Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven's new Nightmare, the 7th one, when the whole Olympic scandal with Tanya and Nancy happened. So that would have been the Winter Olympics, and probably it was November of '94, maybe.
Actually,
When was the Winter Olympics?
it was like February, so the event actually happened. I was a figure skater.
Oh, you were a figure
So
skater.
we talked about this. So I was obsessed, but it happened in January, and that movie got pushed out in April, so it was made very,
Yeah,
very
so
fast.
exactly. So they were making the movie extremely quickly, and Marianne, our producer, said, "Heather, you look so much like Nancy Kerrigan." And I'm like, "I do?" She's like, "You look just like her. Look at this." And she brought a newspaper that had Nancy's face on it, and I said, "Wow, you're right. Gosh, I do kind of look like her." And she's like, "I'm calling the producer, I'm telling him, you have to come in to audition for that part." So we found out who was producing it, and we called the casting director, actually, and she said, "Okay, come on in," and I went in with my hair pulled tight back in one of those Nancy Kerrigan ponytails, and she's like, "Wow, you really do look like her." So I got the part pretty easily, and I didn't even think that I would have to ice skate that much, but I did have to go to training. I went to a small rink in Van Nuys, California with my trainer, who was a skater probably like you, who did a lot of skating for various shows, and she was a beautiful skater. And so she taught me how to do some kind of moves to look graceful on the ice, like when you have to come out and stop and have your hands up.
Simple stuff like just standing.
Yeah, a lot of standing, and then
Gotta stand right.
Getting on and off the ice. That was important, and just being, relaxed enough so that you look natural. So luckily I had taken ice skating lessons when I was little, so I wasn't scared of the ice, but I fell several times and I think cracked my head open because I still have no memory now of some of the things that happened, because ice skating is brutal. It's really one of the most brutal sports that you can be part of, because you have to look so elegant and feminine, right? You have to look very feminine, but it's actually
you have to look perfect.
You have to look perfect, and yet you are falling. And my own trainer, she was just covered in bruises, and she was a professional. So, and she, taught me a lot about being a skater. And so we shot in the course of about a week, and they just made that movie right for television. It went out, like you said, in 2 months.
Yeah, they made it and pushed it out quick.
I mean, they just had a guy on a camera shooting a movie. It was literally how they do movies now, but back then it was considered very, very fast.
Yeah, and I love the pseudo-documentary style.
Yes.
Also, so I'm sure that helped in speeding things up.
I think it's a pretty great little movie.
It is a great little movie, and I was actually talking to Bill Mosley about this last night, because he asked me if I had seen I, Tanya, and I said, yes. He's like, did you like it? And I said, yes, but
Yes.
it was basically the exact same script as your
Tanya
movie.
and Nancy.
And they ripped that off
They did.
so hard. And they embellished some things, and obviously the skating was better, and the technology was better.
Yeah.
But like they ripped that off so hard. It was the same script.
It was. Well, one of the things they did. Okay, we won't stop talking about ice skating, but so they had we had a big rink that we worked in, and they put us on a kind of a sled, and they would pull us around with, I don't know whether it was like a Zamboni, but anyway, so we would pretend like we were skating while we're just basically standing on a wooden sled that would be pulled around the ice. So that's why a lot of the shots where the background's moving is how we did that. So, you know, it was hard. There were a lot of falls, and I did cry one time because I hurt my head.
But it was amazing.
It was worth it.
I may or may not own it on DVD.
Really?
Yeah, just saying.
Nice.
Yes, part of my childhood, you know? Okay, so we put the call out to the Dolls of Horror listeners for those who couldn't be here if they had any questions for you. And we got one or two. So Robin would love to know about your experience on working with Mike Flanagan on Midnight Club.
Oh, yes. Well, this is something that my latest piece of work is Dr. Georgina Stanton. I play a woman who runs a hospice for terminal, young people with terminal cancer. And so Mike Flanagan, his casting agent, called me one day and said, you know, we'd like Heather to audition for a part. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, 1 week, like a little small part, because that's, unfortunately, a lot of offers I get are just for very small cameo type roles. And I could only hope that, you know, I'd be asked to do a big part for him. And so when I got the script and it was, you know, a character that goes through the whole 10 episodes, I was just thrilled. And Mike Flanagan is a big fan of horror, obviously, and loves Nancy. So I was able to work for him, and he's just a great guy, and he's kind, and he has very strong ideas of what he wants to do, which is always wonderful to work for someone like that. And so we worked on her character, and then as a bonus, you know, I got to be the devil, I got to play a detective, I got to play all these other characters in the show. And if no one knows the premise of the show, the beginning and the end of the show are usually about the kids living in the hospice, and the hospice is this giant, scary mansion. But at midnight, they sneak out of their rooms to tell scary stories, which all are based on Christopher Pike novels. So Mike Flanagan has, you know, bought the rights to most all of Christopher Pike's work, and we only got to shoot like maybe 4 or 5 of them in the course of our 10-episode show. So I'm really wanting him to figure out how to get those other Christopher Pike novels back on the screen, because they're really good stories to shoot. And if you were a kid of the 90s, you probably read the Christopher Pike books.
As I was Christopher Pike in R.L. Stein's Fear Street, and honestly, I still do, because I don't have time to invest 6 months into a 1,000-page Stephen King novel as much as I love them. But reading a Fear Street book is like watching an hour-and-a-half movie.
Yeah.
Right?
It kind of went right to them, and
and they would actually...
But also, I mean, the Midnight Club books have some very serious themes, and I think kids who read them feel like they're kind of getting a glimpse into a more mature, a little different kind of emotional world than R.L. Stein books, I think. And I don't know.
Well, yeah, different levels.
A little there's lots of little levels.
Yeah, different levels. I was on like the teen level.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's absolutely true. Yeah, the young adult novels of the late 80s, early 90s are really something special.
Yeah, and they're intense. And, and our show is very intense in some parts, and we do have to deal with death. We're one of the best actors in our show, Ruth Codd. Unfortunately, she's the first character to die, and I think when Netflix was like, you're killing her off, like after they saw like what an amazing actor she is, yeah, she was phenomenal. Working with all of those young people was very inspiring.
I have to read this one because it made me laugh out loud how he phrased it. Clark wants to know, he phrased it like this: you know, there is a desire from people to see Nancy go against Freddie again. Do you feel like you are done with the character, or would you be willing to play Nancy one last time?
Ooh.
See what I did there?
Of course I would play Nancy again, because I played her as a teenager, and I played her as a woman in, you know, my mid-20s. I played her when I was 30, and now I really feel like, you know, 30 years later, it would be really fun to play her again. And there's so many great stories I can imagine. Just, you know, every day I think of a new way that Nancy and Freddie could meet and battle. I think of it all the time.
That should be the new Netflix series. I'm just saying.
One a different kind every week. Yeah, that'd be really fun.
That'd be great, right?
Yeah.
Okay, audience questions. Raise those hands. Right there, sir.
What was it like working with Wes Craven? Like, what was he like as a director? Just a person on set, that kind of stuff.
Well, when I first met him, I kind of confused him for like the accountant. I mean, he just didn't look like a director like you imagine. He wasn't wearing cool clothes. He was wearing a tie. He was wearing a button-down shirt and probably khakis. And he just looked like somebody, who's not filled with this crazy imagination. He looked very plain and, not boring, but just very straight. And when I got to know him, I mean, he was very twisted. He had, as a lot of people, I think he was raised in a pretty repressive atmosphere. So he had to expand his own internal world. And all of the ideas that came out of Wes Craven, I think, were probably helped because he wasn't able to express himself as he wanted to as a young person. And only when he became an adult was he able to actually go see films, was he able to have freedom, was he able to, live in an artistic life that he wanted to express. So once I got to know him, he was very witty. His humor was so fast. Like if you said something, he would have a comeback right away. And I always found that really intimidating. I mean, he was intimidating. He was very smart. He, knew what he wanted. He, over my lifetime, he had a lot more power at the end of his career than he did at the beginning. So in the beginning, there was a lot more jokes and a lot more people, kind of screwing around and ribbing each other. And as he got, more confident and more successful, he became kind of a statesman. He became kind of a more, I think people were in awe of him a lot more. And I don't know if he loved that, but certainly I noticed the way people around him acted differently over those 30 years that I knew him. My husband got to work with him on Serpent and the Rainbow, and they had a really different relationship because they were like partying every night, and it was like really wild. They were in Haiti and they were in the Dominican Republic. And when you're on location in a faraway country, people get to know each other really, really well. And then even my husband's father, Lance Anderson, he would socialize with Wes. So I have heard stories about Wes from all different kinds of people my whole life. And so I feel so lucky to have known him. And now I'm friends with his daughter. I know his son. And it kind of feels like an uncle or someone that you would just get to know very well over your life.
That's really cool. Thank you.
Now, speaking of your husband, you also work in the effects world with them,
Yes.
right? I don't know. How do you love that? Is that amazing?
Well,
Or it's so different from being in front
It's
of the camera.
amazing.
So
but I don't love it like I love acting. I am able to do some really fun things and help my husband design some really amazing things. And in fact, seeing Jodelle over there, what is her last name?
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Anyway, she played one of the Buckner children in Cabin in the Woods, and she wore zombie makeup, and they come out of the ground, and she's the zombie, and at the end of the movie Cabin in the Woods, she comes out and kills, I won't give the ending away, but anyway, she is sitting next to me, and it was just incredible. She's already grown up, and she was a young, maybe she was 11 or 12 when she did that movie. So watching David make those characters, designing the Buckner family, designing Merman, designing and then making things like that unicorn, that, all of the things that David's made, I am in total awe, and I kind of watch from the side. I have no artistic talent, I'm not a makeup artist, but there is so much work that has to be done to get those things to the screen, and so that's what I mainly do. And I'm ordering silicone, I'm, trying to get the price down on a bunch of acetate, calling vendors saying, come on, can't you do me a favor on this, or I don't have any budget, you know, I'm that kind of person. So I'm working in a way that I'd like to do it, but it's not my passion. And, you know, being an actor is something that I just really hope can continue. And working for Mike Flanagan really made me think that maybe I have to get, like, more lucky. I guess I have to just, like, work harder to get some more parts.
No. As Elena says, manifest.
I'm manifesting.
Yes.
I did manifest that, so I will continue to manifest.
There you go. Yeah. More questions? Yes. Sam.
It's a two-part. How did you get the role of Nancy? And when you got it, I mean, how did you feel when it projected you to the title Scream Queen?
Okay, what's the last part of the question?
I said, how does it feel to know that that role projected you to the title Scream
yes.
Queen?
Right, so I had asked my dad to loan me, I can't remember what it was, $3,000 or $4,000 to move to Los Angeles to be an actor. And I said, I'll give it, 6 months, and if I get a part, then it will have been worth it, and if I don't, I'll pay you back, when I can. So I was in college, and I was gonna be a sophomore, and this is when I decided to, I've gotta go for it, because I had gotten my Screen Actors Guild card by being an extra in Rumblefish and in Tulsa, and they had given me a SAG card, which is so hard to get, and I thought, if I don't try to be an actor now, it'll never happen. So my dad lent me the money, and he came down to LA to make sure that I was really living in a real apartment. Wasn't living on the street. And so I auditioned for, quite a few commercials and things like that, but the real first movie that I got that was, I did an independent film called Nickel Mountain that was very small, and I didn't really get paid for that. So then I got this Nightmare on Elm Street, and I was gonna get paid, not a lot, I think it was 4 more months. And I didn't really care, what it was. I really didn't care that it was gonna be a horror movie. My agents were very against me doing it. They're like, once you get into a horror movie, you're pigeonholed for the rest of your career, and we won't be able to turn that around for you, and I don't really think you should take it. But I said, look, I really think I should take it. And they're like, whatever. And they actually never worked for me again. They were really, really upset that I took that job. And I worked every single day for 6 weeks, and the movie came out, and I went to see it, and really nothing happened. I mean, people in Hollywood didn't see it. People in America, if you saw it on the screen then, you saw it, but there was no VCRs, there was no VHS tapes, there was no way to go to Blockbuster and watch the movie. So there was a little point of time when, really nothing happened afterwards. But then as soon as VCRs were invented, then suddenly, it started to become a popular movie, and then I started hearing that Scream Queen, and then maybe 5 years later, they made the sequels, and then it got more popular with Nightmare 3, and then 10 years later, we're going to conventions, we're signing autographs. It was a slow ramp up, and now I feel that's the best thing that ever happened to me, but it took a long time for that to settle in, and a lot of it has to do with meeting so many fans and being so grateful.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And you've made it a classic. It didn't happen on its own. It was because of you guys that you watched it enough, hundreds of times, that now it's considered, it was admitted into the Library of Congress. So it's now a very important film.
I'm watching it on Betamax.
I know.
I'm so old.
I had VHS.
I like the beta tapes
Oh, by
because they
the
were
way,
small
if you
and
have
cute.
those tapes at home, the original ones, they're worth a fortune now. I saw one on auction for $8,000 the other day. So yeah, go and find your little Nightmare on Elm Street VHS and take good care of it.
I've got mine with all of y'all's signature on it.
Oh, there you go.
I do the very first one.
These are going to be priceless.
And then I have a laser disc too.
Wow.
I do.
The
Got a
collections,
laser disc.
the collections that you guys have are impressive. Very impressive.
Yep. I still love my Freddie phone.
Oh, you have your Freddie phone. Yeah, these are weird. Yeah, those are great too.
Patrick Hart designed a Freddy Krueger phone with the squishy tongue and everything,
it's
and
pretty
it was
realistic.
blue and it was
Yeah.
great. And he's such a great artist. He's here this weekend, and you He might have some. So go find his booth and check him out. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the booth yet, but don't you hear? He probably built
So
some.
he sells out, you know,
No.
he has them.
Yeah.
It's worth getting them.
I bought 2 last time. Okay, more questions. Yes.
What was it like working with Depp?
So I always say this because, you know, his career has taken him to much higher places than mine has. And I've always admired his work, and he was the nicest person you could ever meet. He was new to Hollywood just like I was. We had so much in common. We didn't know really what we were doing, but I had worked on a few more things, so I would give him all my tips. Like, stand on that mark, then you'll be in focus. Like, that's because, you know, in those days, you had the camera operator or the director of photography who's actually, you know, behind the camera, and then you have someone that's turning the dial for you to be in focus. And they've measured you in all the different spots on the set, so they know that if you're there, you're 3 feet away. If you're there, you're 3 feet 2 inches away. And so these people like have this coordination and this memory that was pretty amazing back then. And so if you were you're not on your mark, you would be out of focus and you'd have to do the take again. So in the efforts to save time, but also usually your best performances are the earlier ones. Like, don't like stand in the wrong place. That was like the first thing you learn as an actor on a set.
Yeah.
But I would tell Johnny things like that. And you know, he was a kind of a shy, not a real talkative person, but you know, he had a great sense of humor and he laughed easily, and you know, we ribbed each other, and we wore the same blue jeans practically, and his were size 28s and mine were 28s, and we would often get them mixed up. Accidentally, it wasn't our fault. Like, the people who did the laundry would, you know, give him my pants and I'd have his pants. The only reason we would know is that mine were shorter than his, so. No, he probably wore 28-30s or 28-31s or something like that, so. The old Levi days, right. And all of our clothes came from a secondhand store. Nothing was new. It was a very low budget movie.
Any others? Yes.
Okay. I loved you in the first one, but my favorite one you're in is New Nightmare. So what was it like doing a movie inside a movie?
Well, I love that idea of a movie inside of a movie. And so when the opening scene is, if you'll notice, I'm looking so glamorous, like my hair looks so great, and like that's the shooting of the movie. And so we decided to make it like a very high budget Hollywood film where I would just, like, no one ever looks bad in those movies. And so, and my pajamas were very elegant, and it was, you know, it was this idea that Wes Craven was making like this really high budget movie, which he never got to do that until he started doing Screams. And then when we got back to the real life, you know, you had to adjust your character so that, you know, this is Heather in her normal life, which, no, that was not my normal life either. It was very glamorous on top of that too, and very, you know, very, very stylized. So, I mean, we were constantly shifting our attitudes because we had to say, okay, this is Heather at home. Okay, this is Heather in her dream. This is Heather scared, you know, with her son in the hospital. And I felt like there were so many different Heathers that I had to play. And, I mean, they're all a little bit like me, but they're not, none of them are 100% like me. And it was very challenging to, like, figure out, like, oh, I'm here now, I'm there now. And you're never shooting in order either. So it was a big, you know, every day Wes and I would talk about, like, okay, where have I been? What am I doing? Where am I going next? And he had it all totally dialed in, and I was often, you know, grasping at straws, like, where am I today? And this is a real dream. Where, you know, where's Dylan?
You done amazing in it. I mean,
Thank you. It was really fun.
I really
it was
liked
really,
it.
really challenging.
It was such a
job.
different kind of horror movie that you've seen. So
Yeah. And again, we didn't know if it was going to be, like, if anybody would like it because it was so unique, and no one had meta, you know, that word wasn't really around. And so we thought, well, people accept it. Well, people accept that Heather is playing herself and Nancy at the same time. So
What was it like working with the great John Saxon?
He
Yeah.
is great. He is and was a great, great man. He had lived through Hollywood in the olden style of movie making, and had worked with all the greatest actors and had such great stories. But he was very intimidating when I first met him because he's a tough guy, you know. I didn't know anything about him except that, you know, he's like a black belt 10 times over, and he doesn't smile a lot. He's not a real smiley guy. And he always had to play such a stern father that I kind of absorbed that and like, oh, he doesn't like me, you know. But then as we got to know each other over the 3 movies, I mean, boy, he's just such a kind-hearted man. And he has a son and a family that he loves so much. And, you know, you just get to know people and then you get to really see who they are. And I miss him. He was a real treasure, really nice person.
It's probably why the Wes Craven, John Saxon, is my favorite, because he wasn't like the stern dad.
Yeah,
Don't,
exactly. Yeah, and then I've been confiding in him, and he's helping me. And I'm glad that Wes made that turn. You know, it's so brilliant to see John Saxon as a new kind of guy too.
And I love that. You know, I've been a fan of him
Yeah.
for forever. Blood Beach,
Yes.
no, but no.
Yeah, if you went on
Genius.
this John Saxon movie marathon, I mean, he played.
Black Christmas.
Well, and back in those days, like a person like him, he had like a more olive complexion. So he played, you know, Mexican horseback riding, like horse trainers. He's played all sorts of nationalities and all different kinds of people. His roles were always very different, and I think he loved that about his, you know, he loved that about his career. But nowadays, you know, now they wouldn't probably have him play those characters.
Any questions over here in the back?
Yeah, Mike, same precedent podcast. For you, like on set, could you describe a little bit, like maybe an allegory or a time in the life of like, because the common theme in horror is just those intense scenes, those murder scenes. Like,
Right.
how was it as an actress or an actor on those days when you guys had to film that intense?
The intensity.
Yeah.
Oh, that is such a good question. Well, let me think of one, for example. Oh, well, so especially Nightmare 7. Well, I mean, Nightmare 1, too. Nightmare 1, it was intense every day. I mean, every day it was only 20 days of shooting, as I recall, or 22. It was so every day was just packed with these really intense scenes. And like finding Tina, I mean, like realizing that Tina's been killed, for example. So on Nightmare 1, we would all be joking and laughing around, and Robert would be like cutting us all up, and then be like, action, and then we're like, you know, we're having to get really serious. Because we didn't really know what to do. We were so young, and we would just do our best. But by the time I did Nightmare 7, I felt like there was so much more weight, like, to making these scenes really intense. And so, and as an actor, I'd probably evolved a little bit more to realize that I had to really prepare, you know, emotionally to get to the point I wanted to get to. And sometimes I was successful, and sometimes I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be. But especially in the final scenes when I'm in the dungeon and I'm trying to find Freddy, like that fight that we had to do, and I, you know, get to say, fuck you, you know, and like we practiced a lot, we worked on our choreography a lot, we made sure that we knew where we were gonna be and be in the right light, be, you know, practicing. It's kind of like a dance. Robert would be like left, right, left, and I'm like right, left, left. And, you know, we do little things with our feet.
It was a tango.
It was a tango, exactly. And Robert's really into planning all the fight scenes and
safety right there.
And safety too, because he had those claws and he never wanted to, you know, have me go left and he goes right. Ouch. So we always practiced a lot. And even in Nightmare 1, all those scenes in the bedroom with the, you know, feathers flying and he's lifting me up, and we would rehearse, you know, probably an hour, getting all the moves just right, and then they would, you know, let us do it more spontaneously. Those scenes with Robert were the hardest because you wanted to be scared and natural, but you've already rehearsed it a lot, and that You know, those, I think, are the hardest scenes to do. You want it to be spontaneous seeming, but you really have gone over it a lot. And that's the biggest part of, I think, being an actor, is making it look fresh. So I love the intense scenes. I love all the scenes with Robert. Those are definitely my favorite. And the very technical scenes, like in the bathtub, those were always really fun. But when Wes says, you know, action, you just had to like send it all away. Like everything that you had learned, everything that you had practiced, everything that you wanted to do, you just had to let it go and just hope that what was going to come out of you was right, and not think about it. Because the minute you start thinking, you look like you're thinking, you know, and you can tell when actors are thinking on screen, and I hate it, but I know how hard it is to do that. And you want it to just look like it's a regular day, you know. So that's the hardest part.
I saw another one over here somewhere, right there.
You. Okay, we'll get both of you.
Yeah, let's do both.
Yeah, I have a quick question. You were one of the original final girls. Why did they get you in 3? That didn't make any sense.
Why they kill me in 3?
Yeah, well, because
Wes Craven does not care.
Thank you.
Like he didn't buy into any of that.
Nope.
He didn't look at the outside world and say, oh, they're calling Heather a final girl, therefore I cannot kill her. He was thinking about a story that his imagination envisioned, and in the old, you know, in the literature that you would examine that would be closest to, you know, Freddie versus Nancy stories, if Nancy dies, then she's actually elevated in your caring about her. She's elevated as a hero, she's elevated into this new place. And I do think that it succeeded in some ways, because if Nancy had lived, it might have been like, oh, they're just waiting for another sequel, you know, here we go. It's gonna be Freddie and Nancy again next time. And when she died, everyone was shocked. And, you know, people tell me like they cried, like they couldn't believe that this character was gonna sacrifice herself for the young, you know, the younger kids, you know. And whenever anybody sacrifices themselves, and they actually become a different kind of character. And I think he wanted her to be that. Now, I think once he finished, you know, killing me off, then he was tortured for several years thinking, oh my gosh, how can I bring her back? And so he said he worked very, very hard to come up with the Nightmare 7 storyline, because he wanted Nancy and Freddie to meet again, but he didn't know how to do it and he wanted it to be very natural. And so that's the idea that he came up with, and of course now it's like such a brilliant, brilliant idea. So he didn't take the easy way out, and that's why I think we respect him so much.
Next one? Yeah.
So I've always been curious about this. Okay, we love our franchises, and we've seen yours and another one merge for a movie, better or worse. But the question is, what if an actor, not Heather Langenkamp, maybe other Langenkamp, was to get an opportunity, because there's only so much time in our lives and your life,
Right.
to be in another franchise. Hey, you know, this one's stalled out. But
Yeah.
This one's starting up again. We want you to be the final girl in that. What gives? What do you say? Is that horror?
You know what, I don't know if I have it in me to do it with another group of people. I mean, I feel like I'm in a family right now, and I feel that this family has been very good to me, and I think that it's okay for another person to take on the other franchise. I don't want to say that I wouldn't take a role in another franchise movie, but to be the lead driving character, at this stage of my life, I feel like I'm too loyal to Nancy and Freddie to kind of invest in another big, long, now, franchise. But on the other hand, if I was playing a character that was like super different, that wasn't a final girl, or like say she's like owns a hospice for teens who are terminally ill, like that could be, if that was a franchise, if it had been picked up, I can see playing that character because she's, you know, a 60-year-old woman. I can see playing that into the future and being part of a big franchise and have a really important role in it, but it wouldn't be a final girl role. It wouldn't be like in a Freddie versus Nancy kind of duo. I'm probably too old for that, and I'm okay with it.
You had a small part in another popular horror franchise, and not a very popular movie, and that's Hellraiser.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that kind of like, maybe I jumped into that without thinking about it enough. But
It was a bright spot in the movie, though.
was it?
Yes.
Thank you. So there's not that many movies made in Oklahoma where I'm from. And I happened to be in town right when Hellraiser was kind of casting. And the casting director in Oklahoma City and I were talking about other projects. And he, Chris, that was his last name. Anyway, he often brings me to his acting school to talk to his students because I'm from Oklahoma and they're from Oklahoma, and we talk about filmmaking. And just at that time, he was also casting Hellraiser, and so he's like, "Hey, would you like to be in Hellraiser?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" You know, and so it was like, "Well, come over. We're going to shoot this one day." But I'm not like one that familiar with the Hellraiser whole franchise, and two, I thought that the part was going to be a little bit meatier than that, but it turned out okay. And yeah, that script and that whole movie was nuts. After like they had that one scene with all the witches and they're supposed to be naked, like running around the room, and they had cast some people to be in that scene, and when they saw like what it was going to involve, nobody showed up for work that day. I can't believe it, because they were getting paid like $20 and they didn't want to like take that job. And so I think the actual like the wives of the writer, producer, and the director like were those parts. I think it was something crazy like that. Like they just had to fill in those roles. But no, Gary Tunnicliffe is such a nice guy. He's a makeup effects artist. I really want all the success for him. So that was another reason why, you know, when you get an opportunity to direct a movie like that, it's good when your friends like kind of try to help you. So
I watched it, I was like, okay. I didn't know you were going to be in it.
look at you
But
wearing
it
like
was-
a leopard skin blouse. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
But I didn't look at the cast credits before I started watching it.
Oh.
So I'm like, hey!
Hey.
And it's like, hey girl, and then it was like,
I know.
okay.
But it
What?
taught me a valuable lesson, because a lot of people will call and say, "Well, you do this cameo for me, it's next Friday," or "Will you do this cameo for me? It's, you know, you're gonna take up no time. You just have to come in, come out." And what I realized is that it's really not worth doing a cameo. And very, very rarely is it ever worth it, because you're not able to really have a meaty part. You're not able to show off like what you can do, and you're often literally like the last person to shoot that day, and so it's very tiring, and you don't get really any acclaim, or, you know, nothing comes of it. So,
What about Truth or Dare?
ooh,
That was a great role. And
Did
I
you
was-
like that?
Yeah.
Loved it.
I look like Freddy Krueger in that movie, right?
Slightly, but not quite. But
No,
you
the
know, there were
name of
two
the-
versions of that movie, and yours was my favorite.
Yeah, so that was one of those things where those two movies were made almost at the same time, and I think that they didn't realize, like, oh, there's a movie across town called Truth or Dare, and so misfortune to have the same name as the other movie, but ours was from the Sci-Fi Channel, and so I get to wear this burn makeup on half of my face, and when I had done a horror con in England the day before I went to do that movie, and I got a terrible flu, and so you can hear my voice too. I'm sick as a dog when I did that day, but I, you know, did my best, and those kids were all such good actors, and I really liked that movie. Me too. Yeah, it's a great movie. Basically, yeah, the kids play Truth or Dare in a house they've rented for the weekend, and the game is
Playing them.
playing them, and it's gory.
But
It's really
amazing gore. It's
Really
like-
good gore.
Really good gore.
Yeah.
Looked mostly practical. I'm not
And
sure
another
what it was.
weird ending that's like,
Oh,
yeah, very controversial.
yeah. Anyway, I saw that on a recommendation about 4 years ago, and I fell in love.
you.
I fell in love with
Yeah,
it.
it's kind of like out of the way. You have to really
Yeah,
look
and then
for
I
it.
bought it on DVD. I loved it so much. It was so
Oh, thank
it was so interesting and good, and the whole cast. And I've always loved Cassie Skirbo, you know.
Yeah.
Just, everyone is just wonderful.
Thank you.
The effects were great, the script was solid, you know, so
That's-
check out Truth or Dare if you haven't.
Yeah, the sci-fi one that has Heather Langenkamp in it.
Yeah, that's the only one. Okay, do we have any more audience questions? Let's go right there.
There's Scott, my buddy.
How are you?
Star of I Am Nancy.
Oh.
You'll get to see Scott if you buy my DVD.
Scott is terribly backlit and I can't really see him at all right now, but I'll come see you later.
So I have a question about Nightmare 3. When I saw it the first time in the theater, the scene that really blew me away was when Kristen brings Nancy into her dream and Nancy falls through the chair. And it might seem simple today, but how was that filmed and put together with you coming through the
Oh,
to
you're
the
so,
house?
so that was one of the first visual effects ever done in a Nightmare on Elm Street. It was the first visual effect ever done in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So the concept's simple now, and you could do it at home, probably. You set up a chair, and you lock off your camera. Your camera cannot move during this entire process. You just have to put it on a stand and leave it there. And so you take a video of me falling into the chair, but I just stop in the chair, right? Nothing happens. And then you keep you mark my feet very carefully as well. And then you take the chair away and you put a mattress down, and then you have me fall back into a mattress. And then you marry those two shots and you dial them in so that as soon as my butt hits the chair, you've already gone into the disappearing part of me.
Cool.
And then you have to do, I think, a shot of just the chair. So you have 3 shots and so we spent all day long probably doing that. And you could probably do it yourself in about an hour. These days with all the sophisticated cameras and everything, editing software that we all have. So super fun. Try it. Try it at home.
I remember we interviewed Nick Strawn a couple years ago,
Yes.
and he talked about that effect as well.
Yes.
As well as I think there was a Clorox bleach bottle involved in this Freddy snake scene.
I wonder what that was about.
It's been a long time since it's been a few years
Clorox.
since.
Oh, well, maybe they
we talked
use that
about
as our eyeliner or something.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know,
been a
on
few years
stick.
since we've talked to him, but it's
Yeah.
online. That interview's online somewhere. But he gave him all the dirt on the effects, and it was amazing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good. Those are the fun. Yeah, if you like that kind of stuff, go to those talks.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot. Yeah.
So good, especially practical effects.
Yeah.
Kind of unless it's used sparingly and kind of anti-CGI.
Right,
You know, I need the
right.
practical CGI for helping things out, but if you're a CGI,
Yeah.
not a fan.
Well, and my husband David is always, he's always designing really great, those kinds of visual effects. Like for Cabin in the Woods, we did so many, but one of them was like the little zombie arm that like crawls across the road, like the elevator, and literally, I think we just like pulled it across with a string. Like it was very low tech, a lot of those effects.
Do you have a favorite effect from that film?
Well, one of my favorites is the unicorn, where the unicorn comes galloping and then, impales the guy against the wall. And those are great if you're making your own horror movies. Those impaling shots against a wall are super easy to do. So you have a wall with a hole in it where you stick the actor's head through it. And then you make a dummy body made out of straw or something impalable, and you set it up in front of the wall so it looks like there's a guy standing there like that. But this is all fake. It's all just, a straw man, basically. And then you pack the straw man with a blood bladder full of blood, and then you bring your unicorn in. Have your unicorn come and just, impale him in the heart, wherever you want him to be impaled, and squirt the blood, and then the guy does all these, acting, making you look like he's getting, tortured. And there you go. You got it.
So I have one final wrap-up question for you.
Okay.
Okay, so you are a very inspirational performer as well as person.
Wow.
I love asking this to people I'm inspired by. What is your philosophy?
Whew. You want my?
Take your time.
You want my really depressing for all that? No. My philosophy actually is go after what you want to do. You might not be successful, but you just need to go after it. And once you've tried, you're just so much better off for it. And you can also sometimes change your path along the way. So I really wanted to try to be an actor. I really did try, and I was lucky that it panned out. But later in my career, it wasn't panning out, and I wasn't getting a lot of jobs, and so I said, well, I want to have a family, and so I went after that, and I had my kids, and they grew up and went to college, and then you go along the way, and things inspire you, and it inspired me to help my husband in his business, and I went and did that, and I always feel like you know what's going to make you happy at that moment, and like kind of about manifesting, it's kind of similar to that. But worry about yourself, worry about what you want to do. Don't worry so much about what other people are doing. And we only have this one life. But I also kind of believe like we might have other lives coming up, and we probably had other lives behind us. So the whole range of experience is probably available to us. So just pick something. Pick something. That's my philosophy.
Beautiful. Pick something. Thank you very much.